I'm going to take you through my working best practices portfolio real quickly. I'll also post a link so you can actually read through this information. But I just wanted to quickly go through some things here. So for social emotional learning, I have two examples. The first one that's a little bit more fleshed out is giving students a journal prompt to respond to at the start of class. And the way that it's set up is they can decide if they would like to write for 2 or 3 songs. So, like, they can choose different songs to listen to, or if they would rather, I set a timer for 10 minutes. Um, the reason behind this exercise, and I give a lot more information about like the ins and outs of this exercise, but the reason behind this exercise is it serves as kind of a grounding experience for students, as well as it encourages self-awareness, social awareness, and positive relationships between students and teachers, especially when approached in two different ways. One is a dialectical way of journaling, and there's a study conducted by two scholars titled Strengthening Student-Teacher Rapport Through the Practice of Guided Dialogue Journaling. And they say that they've studied this approach, and throughout the entire program, students were observed to be more proactive and responsive in class. So it seems a little bit like convoluted because focusing individually on a way of studying or an individual activity can actually, in fact, impact responsiveness in class, which is interesting. And I think they talk about this in their report too, which is linked at the bottom of this page. But they talk about how just like developing that one-on-one relationship with a student, writing them back, writing comments on their journals can really change the culture of your classroom. Another study and another different way to approach journaling is through narrative journaling, which is used actually as a therapy practice a lot of times to process trauma. But it can be just for everyday processing of your emotions as well. Narrative journaling encourages students to reflect on their day as if writing a story or taking a snapshot picture of a specific moment that may have been difficult or challenging. They always have alternative journal prompts if they feel uncomfortable sharing. There are two authors who co-wrote an article titled Forming a Story, The Health Benefits of Narrative, and this is a little bit older in 1999, but there are many more recent studies too that talk about the benefits of engaging in narrative storytelling. They say that when people put their emotional upheavals into words, their physical and mental health improves markedly. And they don't just have evidence of this in one specific group of people. They talk about positive health and behavioral effects that they've been found with maximum security prisoners, medical students, community-based samples of distressed crime victims, arthritis and chronic pain sufferers, men laid off from their jobs, and women who have recently given birth to their first child. So this is a skill that students are practicing and learning in the classroom that helps them in so many different kinds of ways. One specific example I have of this is we had an active shooter scare at my school this past year. And after that incident, as a way to process and kind of like close that event if you can, I had students practice narrative journaling voluntarily. They didn't have to, but it was a journal prompt option. And many of them experienced almost immediate relief or expressed feeling a lot of relief after writing an ending to their day. So I had them kind of walk through the whole day and what they experienced, and then write how their day ended, and then just close the journal. And I think that was a really powerful example of how this could work. Again, it was totally voluntary. I don't make students share if they don't want to. What they have alternatives of what they can do that are highlighted up here. But I've just found journaling to be an excellent way for students to connect with themselves and to connect with myself as their teacher as well. I got a little lazy here with references. They're not in APA format, but I looked at just the basic KSDE website for what social emotional learning should look like or what the goal is. Here are the two links for the articles that I used. They're both available through the Fort Hays State Library. A second example for social emotional learning would be the way that I have students ask questions. So I have kind of a specific outline of ways that they can approach different questions that they might have when working on an assignment. And they follow these steps, and after like the first month or so, I didn't have to tell them these steps, they just kind of automatically did it. The first is to reread instructions, so you're being self-sufficient, you're asking 2 peers for help, you're working on communicating with others. Then you've got to Google it because we've got the internet, it's a wonderful thing, and then they need to come to me with a specific question. So this second example, I didn't really go into the deep rationale behind it, but I've seen it really help students grow with self-advocacy in particular. Having them find a specific question is really important. Okay, project-based learning. I'll try to go a little bit faster. I had an idea for a storytelling project, so we're focusing on graphic novels, and they would have to meet certain criteria, but they would be able to, the criteria is loose enough that it wouldn't really be structured, like they would be in charge. So they need to identify a central theme that contributes to a major literary conversation. They'd need to identify a news story that goes along with that theme. They would have to create a story arc that follows the theme of the story. And they'd have to select a unique medium through which to tell the story. So you could collaborate with art classes, with music, with theater, with the woodshop, etc. to present this story. And I use this link on our class website that talked about the difference between project-oriented and project-based learning. And I thought about this quote that the project is based in the real world, addressing problems that people actually face and not focused on a grade. Students are naturally invested. So the idea for this project would be that it wasn't headed towards a grade. It would just be for the sake of storytelling. And we would talk about kind of the importance and impact of telling hard stories or each other's stories or our own stories. It would be awesome to have a gallery experience where students would tell these stories on a platform that is shareable. The goal would be to focus on storytelling for the sake of sharing impactful human experiences. And this can also kind of go hand in hand with social emotional learning practices that happen in the classroom every day. So we wouldn't necessarily be doing this. There would be maybe a couple pieces that are working towards a grade, but the actual presentation and conveying of the story would not be for a grade. It would be for the sake of the art, which I think a lot of my students could get behind. Individualized learning plans. So there are 2 things that I mainly do. I focused specifically on these guidelines from the KSDE website linked on our classroom page. The first one is flexible seating, and the second is choice and listening strategy. So I try to employ a lot of student agency, and I think that's how I kind of base my individualized learning plans off of their own agency, as well as if they have IEPs or other specific specifications or goals that their parents have come up with or that I've come up with. All of that works together, but it always starts with student agency. And these aren't necessarily academically focused, but I don't have fancy tools for flexible seating, but I allow my students to choose where in the room they sit and how they sit. I say, while employing choice in the classroom is a small detail, I find that it hits all of the expectations listed above. So flexible seating is evidence-based. Students are learning skills like self-reflection and awareness that are relevant to their future lives outside of the classroom. They are engaging in co-creation of learning paths, and some seating even involves digital tools. So some of my students just work best when their hands are busy or listen best when their hands are busy, and we'll get into that for the second example. So this is kind of where digital tools can come in handy. While listening to audiobooks, which we do a lot of in my classroom, students can select a strategy for listening. So some students will follow along with guided notes that I provide. Some may choose to play a game on their Chromebook, and that kind of sounds counterintuitive. I know we're trying to get them to not play games, but I've actually realized that some of them, especially kids who might struggle with ADHD or some kind of attention deficit, really love being able to play a motorcycle game on their computer. Obviously, there's no sound. They're not on their phones, but their hands are busy and they're actually able to listen better. Some will follow along with the book, just in a traditional sense. Some ask to draw, or some lay on the ground. As long as they're not sleeping, that's okay. And I do a little bit of, I do check-ins every once in a while to make sure that they are really comprehending what's going on. If they're struggling to truly comprehend what we're listening to, I get to choose their strategy. So we change as a class, and we change the strategy together. The third example that I have for this is a letter that I sent out about class materials that we're using. I think that it's important to be transparent, especially at a time where a lot of literature is being demonized or restricted or heavily criticized, to just be forthcoming with what I'm having students read in my class. So this is an example of a letter that I send out to parents and guardians, and then they can send back their concerns, and we can find a plan that works best for all of us, within reason. This last little document has a bunch of links to different assessments that I've created. So there's a typical assessment that would look like a list of vocab words, and I would have them say 3 things that they know about all of these vocabulary words. Maybe I'd have them choose 10 of this list, and then they would tell me 3 different things that they know about these characters in To Kill a Mockingbird. This comes with a study guide, so we would fill this out together. I would have them fill it out in groups. Rubrics are really important. So I have this rubric that stays the same for every single essay that they write. They're working off of this rubric. There's also a rubric for journal entries, because I do grade journals for participation. So this just gives them an idea of where they're at. And then I also rely on daily check-ins, and this is kind of like the structure. So we'll have a little grammar lesson, professional writing practice, and a journal prompt. And all of this is written in their journals, and I can see and kind of like page through. It's more of like a quick little formative assessment. And for all of these different things, I relied on the links just on our Blackboard community. But that is all that I have. I know I went through really quickly, but I will share this folder and you can peruse at your leisure. Thank you for listening.